Hey everyone, if you want to make your own podcast but you don't know where to begin, Spotify for Podcasters makes it super easy. They've got everything in one place, it's totally free, and you can make money while doing it. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start doing it today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and pretty much everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also supported, and you can even conduct polls and Q&As. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, the platform is totally free. No catch, totally free. When I wanted to start my own podcast, I did not know where to begin, and I didn't think it was even possible. And Spotify for Podcasters made it happen. They made it easy, they made it quick, and I am doing something that I love. What more can I ask for? So if you're interested in starting your own show, you can do it, and I highly recommend you give this a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of E43 Kratom, the podcast about anything and everything Kratom. Great to have you with us on this Tuesday morning, hoping all is going well with you out there today. I'm doing pretty swimmingly myself this morning. Had a little bit of white Thai, probably a gram or so, and then also a gram and a half of green Mang Da. And even though those are pretty small amounts, even for me, those are a bit on the lower end. They pack the punch and they really do the job. I mean, I'm moving, I'm doing great. I'm feeling like I'm on top of my game. And what more can one ask for? So, doing really well. Today, I wanted to talk about something that I just found in the news. This is something that I just found this morning, actually. And this is in Antara News, which is one of the lead news organizations of Indonesia. And as always, I will link the article in the description of this episode for all of you. And what this article is talking about is really neat. It's the cooperation between Indonesia and the United States, specifically around Kratom. Pretty specific, right? And I've already known this fact here, but I did, look it up to make sure, so I'll also include that source in the description. 95% of the world's supply of Kratom is coming from Indonesia. It's a powerhouse. I thought the number was something like 90%. So 95%, I mean, it's a lot. And that basically makes me think that cooperation between Indonesia and the United States is pretty paramount when it comes to export-import policy if the United States is to continue having, steady supply of Kratom. And what this article is actually hinting at is that it's been increasing, and that's something that the Indonesian government more or less values, but there's some wiggle room there, because then you also have the equivalent of the DEA in Indonesia, the National Narcotics Agency, or BNN. And they have been pretty opposed to Kratom. And they also, I know, for at least, I believe it's that they've revisited this several times now. I know that in the second source I linked in the description of this episode, it mentions in the article there that Indonesia has, in 2017, they were supposed to outlaw Kratom, and then they decided to re-review it in 2021 or 22, and then they revisited that and pushed it to 2024, and it just keeps on getting pushed up and off. I am very unclear around this process. I'm not the one to ask about this. I need to do a lot more research into this, and I know that other people do have the answer. So please don't take my, words as gospel on this sort of thing. But from what I can tell, it seems like it's not something that's going to be outlawed in Indonesia tomorrow, or, even in 2024. I don't think that that's necessarily cemented in their policy. So there seems to be a lot of discrepancies here. And of course, from the U.S. side, we have the same thing. There's no judgment on their part. I mean, the U.S. also has the same issue where we have a DEA and an FDA that are pretty openly opposed to Kratom being accessible to the public. But then you also have senators and certain states that are making it legal and putting into place regulations and frameworks around how we can keep it legal and accessible to the public. So, yeah, it's things aren't, cut and dry and clean. It's things are messy, and that's how it works. Anyway, getting back to the matter at hand. So, the chief of the Presidential Staff Office of Indonesia was talking about how their development in kratom exports to the U.S. has been growing. They're very proud of that fact, and that they think that this is a priority that should continue to take place. And basically, the interesting thing that I caught from the U.S. side here is that one of the people as part of this meeting where this article came out of was the Utah State Senator Bramble. And Bramble, he's come up in a couple of episodes that I've done before. He's vocally in favor of kratom being accessible to the public in the U.S. He was at this meeting, and there are two things I'd like to point out about this. The first thing that he said was something along the lines of the fact that kratom has become an important commodity in the U.S. as drugs made from the plant can help reduce pain and anxiety. And then it also says, thereby acting as substitutes for opium. I don't know if it's not a direct quote that I'm reading there, so I don't know if that's actually translating over correctly. I think that's a little specific for what he would say. I think he probably said something more like can act as a substitute for opiates, but I wasn't there, so I don't know. But that's what that says. And I think that is, it's just fascinating to me to see kratom being brought up in international policy and import, laws and legal conversations and policy conversations between nations. How cool is that? This is like we're watching kratom international policy in action. And not only that, but the two nations that are coordinating on this together have agencies within those countries that are against allowing kratom to be accessible and out there. What with the BNN in Indonesia and the FDA and DEA and other organizations and agencies against it in the US. So that's one thing I found interesting. The other thing that I found interesting around Senator Kurt Bramble was a direct quote from him. And he said, kratom is a safe natural product, but the challenge is that kratom is often contaminated with E. coli, salmonella, and heavy metals. So I hope from this meeting we will get the same understanding of kratom. I hope that there will be regulations to guarantee the safety of kratom that will be exported to the United States. So that, I think, is super interesting to me because Senator Bramble is essentially taking the KCPA stipulation that, processes around kratom production should be somewhat well regulated because of the risk to consumer safety otherwise. And he's taking that argument from the state level KCPA's, Kratom Consumer Protection Acts, and he's translating that into an international policy whereby he's advocating for that sort of system to be in place for exports of kratom coming from Indonesia and going to the United States. And that it's kind of just like, going further down the vine. It's like instead of just approaching, the kratom that arrives in Utah and is then sold through companies there or elsewhere and then shipped to Utah in the US, he's going straight to the source. He's like 95% of kratom comes from here. Let's stop the salmonella and heavy metals and E. coli before it leaves Indonesia. Let's have a similar policy set up there. And that makes perfect sense to me. It brings up a whole host of new, I guess, challenges because, of course, trying to convince a country of changing the way they do things or increasing some sort of regulation is I mean, I'm not an expert in international policy, but that's a pretty big ask, right? Like, you're a nation, you're coming to another nation saying, hey, do you mind changing this thing? Now, of course, I'm sure that it's in the interest of both nations, but there are probably a lot of specifics that will go into that maybe I'm not thinking of at face value, because the first thing I think of is, well, that'd be great. But how that actually is, how that comes to fruition is a whole nother story. But it's a story that I want to learn about. So I'm gonna monitor this. I'm gonna keep looking at how their export policy might change in Indonesia, or any quality standards that might come into effect, or production methods that are not allowed when being exported to the US. Because that's a big deal, 95% of the world's supply. That is a big deal. So anyway, I thought I'd flag this for you all and would send it out there into the ether, and would love to hear from you on what you think. Or if you have any insight or knowledge into the Kratom situation in Indonesia or any other country, outside of the United States, I'm always interested in learning about it. I am a nerd when it comes to that sort of thing. Like I love to learn about specific detailed policies in some other place or region and how that affects the world, just how cool is that? Outsized impact. So let me know. Anything, everything Kratom at gmail.com. And again, thank you all so much for listening for another episode of Everything Kratom. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow. All right, everybody, take it easy. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.